What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about some important deep waiver stashes that I think maybe you guys should be looking to pick up or potentially just keeping an eye on over the next few weeks, because I think some of these players can end up being startable down the stretch and will be players that I think are relevant, kind of in the second half of the fantasy football season. So this is going to be a little bit different from my waiver wire video. For my waiver wire video, I do players that are rostered in 50% or fewer leagues on ESPN. For this video, I limited the criteria to rostered in 20% or fewer leagues, so there is a decent chance these players are going to be available on waivers for you. There are going to be some repeats from that waiver wire video, but there are also going to be, some new interesting options to kind of keep your eyes on moving forward. If you have any fantasy questions, drop them down below, and let's just dive into some of these players. So we're going to start it off at the running back position. These are just ordered by their roster percentages, not necessarily like what players I think are the best pickups. So we're going to start off with Tajay Spears, currently rostered in 17.7% of leagues on ESPN. And the really interesting thing about Tajay Spears here is that in his first 3 NFL games, he has outsnapped Derrick Henry in 2 of them. I really don't think anyone thought that was going to be possible through 2 weeks. Derrick Henry is known for just being this absolute workhorse. Tajay Spears is 18th amongst running backs with 10 targets, which isn't crazy, but operating as the number 2 to be, kind of middle of the pack in terms of starters, I think that's a pretty solid place to be. He's averaging 5 carries a game. Nothing crazy there, but still kind of notable when you're sharing a backfield with Derrick Henry. Since 2019, which is pretty much when Derrick Henry took over as like the clear workhorse, his lowest opportunity share over a full season was 78.5%. He had above an 80% opportunity share in 2019, 2021, and 2022. This season, he's right below 70%, so Spears really is kind of cutting into his overall share of this backfield, and at this point in the season, Tajay Spears is definitely worth rostering because at worst, he's the clear handcuff for the Titans. We really haven't seen another running back cut into Derrick Henry's workload like we have here with Tajay Spears, so if Derrick Henry were to go down, you'd have to assume that Tajay Spears would be stepping into a pretty significant workload. Who knows how this backfield kind of shakes out throughout the rest of the season, but I still think Tajay Spears is definitely worth rostering at this point. Then the next running back is going to be Kendre Miller, rostered in 16.6% of leagues. He kind of had a tough break to the season. I think a lot of people thought he would have had the opportunity to kind of work into this backfield. With Kamara suspended, him and Jamal Williams could kind of be in some sort of split. Unfortunately for Kendre Miller, he misses the first 2 games of the season with injury, but then Jamal Williams going on IR has really kind of opened things up for Kendre Miller. I think some people think he might be kind of cooked for fantasy now because we have Alvin Kamara coming back. Obviously, that's not ideal. You'd like to have, a few games where he can operate as the running back 1, but I really don't think Kamara coming back makes him unrosterable at this point. With the Saints going out this offseason, bringing in Jamal Williams, and then also drafting Kendre Miller while they had Alvin Kamara on the roster, I think it's pretty clear they don't want to give Alvin Kamara this 3-down workhorse role. If they did, maybe they just bring in one of those guys, right? But signing Jamal Williams plus spending solid draft capital on Kendre Miller, that's probably not a move a team's going to make if they have a running back that they think can be a workhorse for them. So I do think Kendre Miller over the next few weeks has an opportunity to carve out a weekly role in this offense, to get in some sort of split with Alvin Kamara, and then potentially kind of earn that spot before we get Jamal Williams back. You're going to notice a trend here. A lot of these running backs are going to be young, or just actually all the players in this video. A lot of them are going to be young. We're going to have a lot of rookies on here. So these are players that typically build throughout the season and can end up being really relevant towards the end of the year come the fantasy playoffs. So Kendre Miller, definitely someone to keep an eye on. A player I've been talking about pretty much all offseason long, Tank Bigsby, rostered in 16.5% of leagues. To be completely honest, he hasn't been as involved as I was expecting through 3 weeks, but I still think he's one of the top handcuffs and definitely one of the best handcuffs that isn't widely rostered in most leagues. Bigsby's not going to have a ton of weekly involvement, at least this point during the season, but he has kind of worked in the red zone so far this season. He's taken 2 goal line touches from Travis Etienne, so I'm guessing the Etienne owners aren't too happy about that, but that's at least something, right? They're trusting him near the goal line At least he has that role kind of locked in here. I think a Travis Etienne injury makes Tank Bigsby very, very valuable. And if there's anything that we should have learned over the last week or two with the Nick Chubb injury, handcuffs are very, very valuable for fantasy football. Week to week, they may be doing nothing in your lineup, but whatever like wide receiver 6 you have sitting on your, the bottom of your bench, I can promise you that having a Tank Bigsby, a Kendre Miller, a Tajay Spears, those players are going to be so much more valuable because they can turn into RB2s, RB1s just based on a single injury. That wide receiver 6 you have on your roster probably is never going to be cracking your lineup and probably doesn't have much hope of breaking out throughout the rest of the season. So I really like these handcuff options. Now these last two players are actually rostered in less than 5% of leagues on ESPN. We're going to start it off here with Rico Dowdle. I feel like he's not like widely regarded as like a top handcuff, but when you kind of look at this Cowboys offense, this backfield, I feel like he probably should be. Through 3 weeks, obviously outside of Tony Pollard, Dowdle is leading the Cowboys running backs in snaps, carries, and targets, so he does seem pretty locked in as their current running back too. We've also seen the Cowboys go out and put a pretty significant amount of work on Tony Pollard. He's leading the NFL in carries and receptions, but Tony Pollard has really never handled this type of workload, not even in college. Like he never handled a significant workload in college, and obviously in the NFL, he's been in splits with Ezekiel Elliott. So who knows if he's able to kind of handle this throughout a full 17-game season. If Tony Pollard goes down, I don't think Dowdle's going to come in and take over like his full workload, but through 3 weeks, this Cowboys backfield is averaging close to 30 carries a game, 29.7 carries a game, and then 7.3 targets. So there's a lot of work in this offense that could be kind of divvied up. Even if Dowdle's stepping in, taking 60% of that, I mean, 15 plus carries in this Cowboys offense, that is a very, very viable role for fantasy football. So definitely someone who maybe in like deeper leagues, more competitive leagues, maybe out there on waivers and is definitely worth getting picked up. And then the final running back here is going to be Keaton Mitchell. This is definitely the deepest dive in this video. He's rostered in less than 1% of leagues. Keaton Mitchell is an undrafted rookie for the Ravens. He was kind of impressing throughout the Ravens training camp. He ends up getting placed on IR with a shoulder injury, so he's not, currently active. He's not going to go play in week 4. And I think heading into the season, it would have been pretty tough to see Keaton Mitchell like really earn a relevant role in this offense, right? Coming in, undrafted rookie, you have a competitive team, you have some running backs there that have been in the building for a while. But now with J.K. Dobbins out for the season, you have Justice Hill dealing with a toe injury. I believe Gus Edwards is currently dealing with a concussion, even though I think he's back at practice. There's just a lot of injuries that have happened to this Ravens backfield. And after Dobbins went down, it really just kind of felt like this backfield was all over the place. Like our Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, like these elite running backs that could hold off a potentially talented rookie. I don't think so. So I'm not saying that Keaton Mitchell is going to come in off of IR and lead this backfield, but there is a path to him getting work. And if he can just get on the field, maybe he outperforms Justice Hill. He outperforms Gus Edwards. I think if you're in like a 10-team league or even like a casual 12-team league, right, where you can kind of dominate the waiver wire and your roster is really strong, he's probably not someone you should look into picking up. Maybe just a name to kind of keep an eye on. But I think in like really competitive 12-team leagues, or like 14-team leagues, just normal 14-team leagues, then I think he starts to kind of become more relevant. So those are going to be the running backs. Now shifting over to 5 wide receivers, got to start it off here with Jameson Williams, rostered in 16.1% of leagues. One interesting thing here about Jameson Williams is that a lot of these other options, they may kind of come up towards the top of like the projected points, like week by week when you're looking at the waiver wire. For Jameson Williams, since he's suspended, he's probably going to be buried, right? Because he's not projected any points. So he could be sitting there, and people just don't even know. That is a possibility. But behind Amon-Ra in this Lions wide receiver room, it is completely wide open. Through 3 weeks, the best wide receiver behind Amon-Ra has actually averaged 15 PPR points per game, so it could definitely be a valuable role in this Lions offense. And I understand Jameson Williams' run with the Lions hasn't exactly been ideal. He's coming off the ACL. He barely plays in the 2022 season. When he does play, he's really not a factor, doesn't play a ton, and even when he's in there, didn't do anything crazy. I think he had one long touchdown, and that was pretty much it. In the 2022 season, his reports out of camp also haven't been great. And then he gets hit with the 6-game suspension for gambling in the building, or sports betting in the building, whatever it was. So it definitely hasn't been smooth sailing for Jameson Williams, but I don't think we can deny the talent. And there's really not like a clear-cut wide receiver 2 for the Lions where you're like, okay, that guy's going to hold off Jameson Williams. Maybe he comes in after the suspension, can't get his footing, and that's what it is. Like, that could happen. That's definitely a possibility, but it's also possible he works into that wide receiver 2 role, playing behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, and ends up being very, very relevant for fantasy football. So definitely someone who I think should have that roster percentage bumped up a lot. Now we're going to be shifting into some rookies, starting it off here with Marvin Mims, rostered in 12.8% of leagues. This has been an incredibly encouraging start to the season production-wise for Marvin Mims. On the other side of it, his usage has been pretty disappointing and honestly kind of puzzling through 3 weeks with how well he's performed. In week 2, he only ran 6 routes, but caught 2 passes for 113 yards and a touchdown. So he made the most of his opportunities in week 2, was making big plays. You would think, he's probably going to have a much larger role heading into week 3. And I guess his routes were bumped. He went from 6 to 11 in week 3. He was targeted 5 times on 11 routes, which is a very impressive target rate. 3 receptions for 73 yards, and then he also returned a kickoff for a touchdown. So through 3 weeks, he has shown that he is just a big play waiting to happen, and it's just really hard to see Sean Payton not giving Marvin Mims more opportunities going forward. This Broncos offense is definitely better than last season. It's not like they're going to be some sort of elite offense, but last year it was really tough to get anything out of those weapons. I think they're improved this season. He could work his way into 3 wide receiver sets. Maybe Judy goes down, Courtland Sutton goes down, and then you could see his opportunity really spike in this offense. But just kind of like I talked about at the top, these rookies, specifically rookie wide receivers, these are players that can definitely break out down the stretch, and if they're talented enough, they will find a way to get onto the field and produce for you. Moving over to another rookie wide receiver, Jonathan Mingo, rostered in 11% of leagues, and he's kind of in a different boat than Marvin Mims here. To be totally honest, I didn't like him as much as a prospect, but he got much better draft capital, and he stepped into a starting role from week 1. So Marvin Mims is kind of having to earn that role. Jonathan Mingo started out as a wide receiver or starting wide receiver for the Panthers. He had a 97% route participation in both week 1 and week 2. That's incredibly strong. He ends up leaving week 3 with a concussion, so obviously his route participation suffered in that one. And he really hasn't put up great production through 3 games. He hasn't done a ton, but in the first 2 weeks, he commanded 13 targets. That's solid volume, in your first 2 NFL games. And then in week 3, even though he only ran 15 routes, he commanded 6 targets on those 15 routes, which is also pretty impressive. He's being used down the field. He has 4 deep targets through like 2.5 games. 2 1/3 games, and then he's 6th in most unrealized air yards, which pretty much means he's being used down the field, but him and the quarterback are not connecting. So as Bryce Young starts to get more comfortable, as Mingo starts to get more comfortable in this offense, I do think he could start to be relevant for fantasy later on in the season. And really half the battle for these rookies is just getting on the field and getting in a position to ball out. Mingo's already done that, so now it just comes down to, is he talented enough to take advantage of it? That still remains to be seen, but he's done half of it by just getting out there, getting those opportunities to run routes and put up production. Now shifting over to another rookie wide receiver, we're going to have Rashee Rice rostered in 8.9% of leagues, and he may be my favorite kind of pickup here out of these deep dive wide receivers. His route participation jumped over 50% in week 3. His usage in week 2 was pretty underwhelming, but it's nice to see he kind of recovers here heading into week 3. I've talked about this a lot, but this Chiefs wide receiver room is just completely wide open. You got Sky Moore, Justin Watson, MVS. You got Kadarius Toney thrown in there. You have Ross. There's just a lot of guys, and none of them have really kind of stamped their spot as like the number 1 weapon, the number 2 target. I feel like of all the guys in that wide receiver room, I think we kind of know what we're dealing with most of them. I feel like Rice is like the real upside wild card here because he's a rookie. And through 3 games, he's been pretty encouraging. He's been targeted 14 times on 38 routes. So that 14 target number is fine, like just under 5 targets a game. But his target rate is very impressive. A 37% target rate is fantastic. It's actually 4th in the NFL right now. So when he is on the field getting his opportunities, he is making the most of it. If he can keep building on his role, I really wouldn't be shocked if he was like a startable option, Chiefs wide receiver 1 in the back half of the season. That is definitely in the range of outcomes here for Rashee Rice. And then the final wide receiver we have here, another rookie, it's going to be Josh Downs, rostered in 6.8% of leagues. I was a huge fan of Josh Downs as a prospect. Thought he slipped in the draft. I thought he'd be more of a round 2 guy. He ends up falling to round 3, but he has been very impressive through 3 weeks. He's not the biggest dude, but he just flat out produces. He's operating as the clear starter for the Colts out of the slot. He has an 88% route participation through 3 weeks, which is really strong. He is the second most slot snaps in the NFL, so he's really just kind of locked down that spot there for the Colts. And he's commanded 24 targets through 3 weeks and has a 21% target share. As a rookie wide receiver in his first 3 games, those are fantastic numbers. I think he could definitely turn into like a viable flex option in PPR leagues throughout the season if he keeps building on this. Once you have the bye weeks, you have some more injuries coming in. I think he's worth rostering. When these rookie wide receivers start to show some flashes, you want to just go out, lock them down on your roster. So I think Josh Downs kind of fits the mold there. So that's going to pretty much wrap it up for some of these deeper dives. As you can tell, a lot of rookies in this video, and even the guys who aren't rookies, they're, pretty much younger options. Typically, those are the type of players you want to go after. Some of your league mates may not be super familiar with them. And then when you have those veterans on the waiver wire, they're probably there for a reason, right? Like if a player's played 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons, you pretty much know where you're going to be getting out of them. These rookies, these second-year players, they're more wild cards. You don't know exactly what they're going to bring to the table, so they may, end up providing nothing, but they could also end up booming in the second half of the season and end up being potential league winners for you, or pieces that really just kind of carry you to the championship. So like I said, keep an eye on these players, maybe pick them up if you have some droppable options. So like I said, keep an eye on these players, maybe pick them up if you have some droppable options. But that is going to wrap it up for this one. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.